Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to Wix Wiz. Today I'll be showing you how to use the Velo Google Sheets integration package to connect a Google Sheet that you own to your Wix website, make updates, read the data, and display it on your Wix site. This could be a huge time saver for a lot of businesses. So let's get started. So the initial setup for this project is quite detail heavy, and that's why I'm going to be following along with the documentation and taking you line through line of how to set it up and demonstrating each step. I will be linking to this documentation below in the description. I do recommend that you have it open and follow along as well. The first step that we are going to take is setting up our account and project on the Google developer site. This is where they manage a lot of their different APIs, and specifically the Google Sheets API, which is free to use. And the first step that we're going to need to take is to go to the developer site and create a new project or choose an existing one. So right over here, I have the developer site open. This is what you should arrive to if you click that link. And right over here, you can either select an existing project or create a new project. I'm going to name my project Google Sheets in English. And here you'll see that you get also this auto-generated project ID. And I'm just going to go ahead and click Create. And this project might take, a minute or two to get started. So in the meantime, let's check out the next step, which will be to click Library and then search for the Google Sheets API and enable that API in our project. So I'm going to go over here and hit Library. And this is the entire library of all the APIs, and you can see that there's a lot going on here. So it's pretty cool. You can check it out if you're interested in some of the other APIs that Google offers. But for now, we're going to be looking for the Google Sheets API. I'm going to go ahead and click search, and here it is. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to enable it for my project. And you can see that I'm in the Google Sheets project over here. This is the project that I have selected. So that's initializing. And I'm just going to head back to the documentation and go to the next step. So that would be on the left sidebar, click Credentials. And then we're going to create credentials and select Service Account. So I'm going to head over here. And you can see here on the left side that you have Credentials. And here on the bottom, Service Account. So I'm going to go ahead and click Manage Service Accounts. And I'm going to create a new service account. So now I need to give this service account a name. I'm going to name it also Google Sheets. I'm being very original. And you can give a description if you'd like. It's optional. And I'm going to grant this service account access to the project. And I'm just going to select the role of owner because it should be the highest role. And I don't want to run into any problems with my project, but you might want to look into these different roles and see what fits your project the best, depending on your specific needs. I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And here there's another optional step, which I am going to run through and skip. So now that we have our service account set up, I am going to go and see what the next step for our project is, and that is on the credentials main page. You just see new entry and click the edit icon, and then we're going to scroll down to the key section and we are going to add a new key and select JSON. So let's head back over to our Google developer site, and here we see the new service account that we created, and I don't see the little edit button, but if I click here on this service account and go into it, then you can see here that there is a tab named Keys, and this is essentially what we're trying to get to. And what I need to do here is add a new key. So I'm going to create a new key, and I'm going to select this JSON option as instructed by the documentation. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create, and now a file has been downloaded to my computer, which I'm going to open up right now and show you this. So you should see this file here, and obviously this is something that you won't want to share with anybody. I'm sharing it with you for the tutorial's purpose, and by the time I publish this, all the information here will be irrelevant and you will not be able to use it for anything, just in case you thought of trying. But anyways, we have some information here that we are going to need to use in the next steps. So let's check out over here what our next step is. Scroll down. Okay, we did that. 6, open the downloaded file and copy the client email value, and then create a Google spreadsheet. And we will need to share the Google spreadsheet with the client email value. So essentially what we've done until now is we've kind of created a fake Google account that will have access to this spreadsheet and can manipulate this spreadsheet. So a Google account that's not a personal Google account, but it's a service account. And it has its own kind of fake email address that we can use to share the spreadsheet with it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy over the client email address, and then I'm going to share my Google Sheet with it. So right over here, I have my client email right over here. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And then I'm going to head over to this Google Sheet that I created with just some mock data that I got from a mock data website. And I am going to share this sheet with this person. And it's important that you select the correct level of sharing. So if you're going to want to edit this spreadsheet with your Wix website, then you'll need to give it the editor level. If you only want to view the data, then you can give it the level viewer. And this can be useful for managing different permissions with regard to your spreadsheet. So I'm going to give it editor so we have complete access. And I'm going to click send. Great. So now we've shared the Google Sheet with that service account. We can go ahead and complete the final step of the setup of the Google platform, and that is to just use some of the information for the Wix Secret Manager. So I'm storing, I kept my downloaded file, so I did 8. In the Wix platform itself, we're going to use the Wix Secrets Manager. If you're not familiar with that, that is basically a place where we can store information that we don't want anybody to ever get access to, because it is essentially the password to our service account, our secret APIs, etc. And we need to create a new secret with this specific name. And we need to store the entire contents of the downloaded file in the secret. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click this and copy it. And now I'm going to head over to the dashboard for the Wix site where I'm going to be implementing this, and go to Developer Tools. Let me zoom in a little bit. So I'm going over here to Developer Tools, and then Secrets Manager. And Store Secret. And I'm going to put the exact name that I was instructed to by the documentation in the name. And I'm going to copy the entire contents of this file and paste it right over here in the value. Okay, and go ahead and click Save. Great, now that the credentials are stored, we can move on to the next step. So I should go to the tab with the Google spreadsheet open. Notice the URL, it contains your sheet ID. Okay, so the sheet ID is inside of the spreadsheet URL. And what we're going to be doing with this ID is copying it and storing it in the Secrets Manager with the name sheet ID. This name is something that you can decide. So here we're doing one example with one sheet, so they're calling it sheet ID. But as you can imagine, if you're managing several different Google Sheets from your website, you will need to give them each unique IDs in the Secrets Manager so that you can manage them each individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this name sheet ID and go to Secrets Manager and store a new secret. So the name will be sheet ID, and from the mock data URL, I'm going to get the ID, which is everything that's after this D here and before the edit. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and store that in my secrets manager. And when you're storing your secrets, you're going to want to make sure that you don't have any extra spaces or anything after the value, because that will essentially ruin the value. So you can click this little view button here, and you can see here that the cursor is right after the Q. That means we're good. But if there was, for example, an indentation like this or a space, then we would have a problem. So you're going to want to notice that. Let's go ahead and click Save. Great. So we saved our credentials and we saved our sheet ID. Sorry. And now the next thing we're going to need to do is install the package. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my website here. This is the website where I'm going to be implementing the Google Sheets. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and head over here to the packages. And this is not a regular NPM package. This is a special Velo package. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, Install Velo Package. And we're going to be using the Google Sheets integration. So I'm going to go ahead and click Install. And after the package is installed, we should see it here listed inside of our Velo packages. And it comes here with a README, which is similar to the instructions that we have inside of the documentation itself. So let's head back to our documentation of the Google Sheets integration. And here we have some explanation about how to import the functions from the package and use them. So there are 4 things that we can do with the package, and that's explained here on top. So we can get data from our Google spreadsheet, append, so that's add new data, we can update data, and we can clear data. Okay, so if you're familiar with CRUD operations, it's pretty much those 4 operations. Creating new things, updating, deleting, and one more, which I can't think of right now. But anyways, so the first step will be to import the functions from the Google Sheets integration backend. And the first thing that I want to try is to use this get values function, because usually getting values is the easiest thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this code over here. And I'm going to head back to our editor, and I'm going to create a new backend file, because we're going to be handling all of these interactions on the backend, because we need to use our secrets, which we stored in the Secrets Manager, and this is not something that we want to expose on the front end of our website. Afterwards, I'm going to show how you can use the information that you get here on the front end of your website. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Google Sheets. And I'm just going to clear all of this wording that they set it up with initially and paste the code snippet that I copied over. And this function is going to be get values. Get value or get values? And there we go. Okay, so for some reason, the quotation marks that it copied over with were not the right ones. It was these weird quotation marks. So just make sure that you switch them over for the quotation marks that you're supposed to have. And that could be single or double, whatever your preference is. Another thing that we're going to need to import here is the get secret from the Wix Secrets backend. And that's in order to get all of the secret information that we stored in the backend of our website in the Secrets Manager. So I'm going to go back here to the explanation. And if we take a look at the get values function, we see that it takes 2 parameters. So one is the sheet ID and the other is the range. And if we take a look here, there's a slightly more detailed explanation of the parameters. just going to zoom in a little bit. But you can see this in your copy of the documentation as well. So the sheet ID is the sheet that we stored inside of our Secrets Manager. And the range is the location in the spreadsheet that we want to select. So that's using the regular Google Sheets or Excel notation, A1, B1. So if we take a look over here, so for example, if I select from A1 to B1, it would be these two cells. And if I select, let's say, from A1 to E11, I'm assuming that it'll select all of these cells. But we'll see in a moment what exactly comes out from that. And there are also two more parameters, which I'm not going to talk about right now, which are not related to the get values. Okay, because get values, you see, it only takes two parameters, so that's sheet ID and range. Okay, and if we take a look here at the example that we have here, so we see that we are getting the sheet ID. And then they created a wrapper function, which does a few other things except for just getting the values, which is this over here. And one thing that you will notice, or at least that I'm noticing right now, is that at no point do we need to retrieve the secret credentials that we stored in the secret manager. And what I'm assuming, and I'm going to go confirm that right now, is that if we take a look here at the package backend, okay, at this Google Sheets JS, then we'll see that they are getting the secret inside of the package. Okay, so this package is a Velo package, so it was built by Wix, and it kind of already knows what it wants to do, and that's why it gave us this specific name to name our credentials secret in our Secrets Manager. So if you get this name wrong, the Wix package won't know what to get and how to manage it. Okay, so this is all happening in the backend. This is something that you don't want to touch. If you touch this file, which I'm not sure you can because there's a little, read only. Okay, so you can't change this file, and that's good, because if you did, then this wouldn't work at all. So that's just a little anecdote about where the credentials are coming from, because that was the first thing that struck me as odd when I took a look at this package. So in terms of our Google Sheet, all we need to really do is to create our simple get value function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a very simple wrapper function. So I'm going to call it get values from Google Sheet. And I'm going to make it an asynchronous function because we're going to be getting a secret from the backend. And the first thing I'm going to do is get that secret. So I'm going to say const sheet ID is equal to await get secret sheet ID. And this should be lowercase, because I think I named it lowercase sheet ID. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to call the get values function. So I'm going to say const result equals await get values. And here we need to pass in the sheet ID, and we need to pass in a range. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the range as a parameter here, so that we can kind of customize it each time that we call this function. And then I'm going to return the results. The result. Okay, so this is a very simple wrapper function. It's not doing any of the kind of validations or checks that the one in the documentation is doing, but it should work just as well. And I'm going to go ahead and export this, which will let us run it here on the back end. I'm going to go ahead and click run, and I'm just going to give it a range. So let's just say A1 to E1. And I'm going to go ahead and click run. And this might take some time because it needs to fetch data from an external source. And you can see here that we got a response, and we got status 200, which is good. You should always be very happy when you see status 200. And what we really is concerning us here is the data part. Okay, so we have some kind of information about the data that we got back, and we have the values. And you can see here that the values came back as an array, and it's essentially A1 to E1, so that's what you see here, A1 to E1. So it's ID, first name, last name, email, gender. Okay, and it came back as an array. Now let's try it again, and I'm going to select, for example, from here until here. So that would be A1 till, let me zoom in a little bit on this screen so you can see a little better. That would be A1 to F16, let's say. So let's try that range and see what comes back. So I'm going to go here and change this to F16 and close this and go ahead and click run. And here we can check out the values. So you see that each row came back as an array. So the first row would be our headers, and then each row after that comes back like this. And now I just want to check out over here in the Google Sheets in terms of the dimensions. So we saw that, let's go back over here, dimensions. So the type of your range, so either rows or columns, but I don't see here, oh, okay, so in terms of update value, you can pass in dimensions. So I guess for update, you can pass in dimensions, but for all the other ones, there's no option to pass in dimensions. That's what I'm understanding here for the documentation. So the only way to get it back is in the form that we got it back in terms of the rows. If you've been experimenting and you found something else, do let me know in the comments. That would be very nice to know. Okay, so now let's see how we can take this data and actually present it in the front end of our website. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this and go to this Google Sheets page, which is a page on the front end of my website. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a table element. Go ahead and search for table. And I'm going to add a table element over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to populate this table using the data. So I'm going to open up my Velo IDE. And the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to import our backend function. So import get values from Google Sheets and from backend / Google Sheets. And what I want to do is as soon as this page loads, I want to get these values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple wrapper function. Call it populate table. This is going to be an async function because it needs to get that data from the backend, which is getting it from the Google Sheets. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say const data is equal to get values from Google Sheets. And here I'm going to pass in a value. So it'll be, let's say, A1 to E16, like we did before. And then don't forget the await here. And then we're going to need to pass this data to a table. So I'm going to go ahead and click on our table over here. And I'm going to rename this Google Sheet table. Okay, and in order to populate this with data, let's go ahead and check out the table element documentation. So in order to populate our table with external data, we're going to primarily be using two parts of this table API, and that is the columns, and later on we're going to check out the rows. So the first thing we're going to need to do is set up our columns, and we're given an explanation here of the different fields or different properties that we need to set up for each individual column. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this as an example of one column and head over to our website. And I'm just going to paste it over here, comment it out. so we can take a look at it and apply it for our use case. So essentially, we are going to be using the first row that we get back from our Google Sheet as the columns, right? Because this is the first row that we're getting back, and typically in a Google Sheet, these will be kind of the titles or the columns that we're going to be using, and underneath is the data. So this row will be row 0, or the first item in the array that we get back from our Google Sheet API. So now back here on the front end of our website, the first thing that I'm going to need to do is to extract the pure values data from the data that we're getting back from our backend. So if you remember, when we called the get values from Google Sheet, we were returned with a response that had data that had values. Okay, and this values is what we actually want to be using for our data in our front end. So this can be handled in the back end as well. Just because we already started setting things up in the front end, I'm going to be doing it over there. So essentially, this data that we get back over here, we want to refine it a little more. So I'm going to call it const rows equals data dot values. Okay, and this should get us back the array with the array of rows. Okay, so it's an array within an array. I'm just going to show it to you one more time. So we have data, that's this entire thing. Then we have data, and we have values, and this is an array where each row is its own individual array. Now back on our front end, what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to extract the first row as the headers. Okay, so I'm going to say const headers equals rows 0. Okay, the first line of the array. And then we are going to be using these headers to create our columns. So I'm going to say let columns, and then headers dot for each header. We are going to use this column object. So I'm going to say const. I realize that I have a typo here in columns. Column equals to this object. But we need to change the values here so that these are the appropriate values for our column. So I'm going to set the ID and the field to and the label all to be the header. And if you have headers that are the same, okay, so for example, in your table, for some reason you have two headers that are exactly the same, you might run into some issues when you're defining the IDs. So you might want to give the IDs some other kind of unique value. But since all of my headers are different, I can take the liberty of doing this. So I'm just going to do this header, data path header. This is the data path is what we are going to be using to connect our rows to the columns. So it's very important that we know what this kind of header value is over here. And the label is what will be displayed over here on top. So if this is good for displaying, then that's great. If not, then you might want to kind of make some kind of aesthetic change or something like that. That would be done over here. So you would change how this label looks. For me now, it's just going to be this header. And width 100, that's how wide it is in terms of pixels. Visible true, type will be string, because all of my data here is all text. And link path, this is something that is optional. And at the moment, since this is not a tutorial specifically about tables, but rather about Google Sheets, I'm going to be ignoring this. But hopefully in the future, I can make a tutorial that kind of goes more in depth about tables and explains that element as well. Okay, so now we created a column, and we're going to need to push it to our column. So columns push and individual column. Now that we set up our columns, we need to set up our individual rows. So I'm going to get rid of this over here because we no longer need it. And let's take a look at the Wix documentation for how to set up the rows. So I'm going over here and going to rows. And we can see here that the rows are an array of objects. Okay, and each object is set up so that the key is the data path, which I mentioned before, that it needs to sit under. So then basically Wix will take this row and it will say, okay, so John needs to go under the column of first name. Doe needs to go under the column of last name. Okay, so this will require us to rearrange our data a little bit because we got an array of arrays. So our individual rows are not associated specifically with a column. So we're going to need to set that up and do that now. So now back on the front end of our site, I am going to create a for loop which will rearrange the data in our rows to fit the format that we need to populate our table. So I'm going to start by setting up an initial for loop, and I'm going to say let I equal 1. And the reason I'm setting it to 1 is because our 0 index in the rows is our headers. So I want to start essentially looping from index of 1. And we're going to run this until we get to the end of the array, and that will be done using I is smaller than rows dot length. So essentially, this will run if, let me just explain this for a second, because this is going to get a little complex. So let's say our rows array, okay, this is equal to an array with arrays inside. And the index of these is 0, 1, 2. And the length of this is 3. So if I want the last I to be equal to the last index when this loop is done running through, then it essentially needs to be equal to 1 less of the entire length of the array. And that would be less than rows.length. It means this will run until 3, but not including 3. Okay, so that's why this was going to work well for us. And then I'm going to say I++. That means it'll add 1 to I each time we run through the loop. So what are we doing each time that we run through this initial loop? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new object, which is our row. And we are going to reassign the values from each of these row arrays to our header array values. And in order to do that, we're going to need to build another loop within this loop. So I know loops within loops are not a good thing in general, but that's the way we're going to handle it here. And I'm going to say for let j equal 0, okay, because here we do want to run through the entire inner array. Okay, so remember, inside of each of these arrays, we have values. Okay, so we have here, item 1, item 2, item 3. And here, let me copy this over here. And here we have header 1, header 2, header 3. Okay, so essentially what we want to do is we want to loop through, and we want to say, okay, for header 1, assign it value 1. For header 2, assign it value 2. Okay, so it's another loop. And then we're going to be doing it for each one of these other arrays, which is our outer loop. So let j equals 0, and then j is smaller than items, is smaller than, okay. So I need to declare something else over here. So I'm going to say const row array equals to rows I. Okay, so I'm essentially saying that the row array that we're dealing with now, okay, is the row of I. So it's, let's say it'll start with this one. Okay, this is of I, rows I0. That will be row I1. Sorry, this will be this. Okay, so that's the row array that we're currently dealing with. And we want to do this as long as j is smaller than um, okay, so I'm taking this back. You see, I'm not going to edit this out of the video because I know that some people enjoy seeing this thought process. So originally I was going to set it up so that so that it would run through the entire values here. But now I'm thinking that there may be some situations, I don't know, if the data is somehow corrupted in some way or something like that, where this array is smaller than this array. And I always want to assign a value for all of my columns, even if that value is nothing. But I always want to assign a value because I'm afraid that if I don't assign a value, then it'll create some issues. So I'm going to, instead of using this row array over here, I'm going to use the headers. Okay, so our headers is going to be our kind of point of truth for how many columns there should be in this table, which makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to say here headers.length. And then I am going to say j++. And now what we're going to do is we are going to start assigning values to this row. So row headers j is equal to rows I j. Okay, so this means that the header that we're in, okay, so let's say if this is equal to 0, then I'm saying that this header 1 should be the key. Okay, so this will essentially be header 1, and then the value that we should assign to it is rows I. Okay, so row 1, that's this entire array, and the specific value of j, which is 0, which is this. So it'll assign item 1 to header 1. Okay, so this looks good to me. I think that this logic should work. And then we're going to want to push this row into a value of rows. So let's say let formatted rows, and this is going to be an array. And then I'm going to say formatted rows push, and we're going to push this row over here. So row. This needs to be over here. Okay, so now we have two values. One is columns. So I'm actually going to change this into an array so that we don't run into issues here. And I'm going to change the name just so that we have some consistency between formatted rows and columns. So I'm going to call this formatted columns. And now what we need to do is just assign these values to our table. So right over here, we're going to say, and make sure to assign the columns first. So this is going to be our Google Sheets table dot columns equals formatted columns, and Google Sheets table dot rows will be equal to formatted rows. And again, so what I set up here, I want to just say two things about it before we test it out. This could all be done in the backend. This doesn't have to be done in the front end. We can format this data in the backend after we get the values from the Google Sheet and just pass pure data to the front end. And that's probably what I would do in a real life situation. And the second thing is that there isn't only one way to do everything. So the fact that I set it up here in this way doesn't mean that this is the truth. It doesn't mean it's even the best way. It just means it's the way that I chose to do it at the moment before running into any issues or before scaling my application or anything like that. So it's just important for me to mention those two things. And I'm just going to call the function populate table here so it actually runs when we preview our page. So I'm going to go ahead and click preview. And it's saying that get value from Google Sheet is not a function. Okay, so let's check out why that is the case. Get value from Google Sheets. Okay. I called it here get values from Google Sheet. And here I called it get value from Google Sheets. Okay, so that's a little issue there. So I'm just going to get rid of that. And let's try previewing our code one more time. Okay, so our data has not populated the table. Ah, there it is. It took a second. I hesitated there for a second, but here now you see that, yeah, here we have on the top our columns that we set up, and here we have our nice little rows, and this is all the data that's corresponding to my Google Sheets. Okay, so that is how you would get data from a Google Sheet in your backend, pass it to the front end, and use it to populate a table. The next thing we're going to do is explore some of the other actions that we could take using our Google Sheet. The next thing that we're going to do is append values to our Google Sheet. So that essentially means adding new data to our Google Sheet, and we're going to explore some different ways that we can do that. So in order to do that, we need to use this append values function. And we see that it takes three parameters: the sheet ID, the values that you want to pass in, and the range, which is optional. So let's go back to our website. And I'm going to create a new wrapper function. And this is going to be add values to Google Sheet. And this is also going to be an asynchronous function. And what we're going to pass in initially will be our values. Now what we need to do is very similar. So we're going to need to get our sheet ID. So I'm going to copy this over here. And we are going to pass in sheet ID and values. Whoops. But our function will be different. It won't be get values. It will be the append values function. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this name of the function from over here and change the name here. And we're going to need to import it as well from the package, because initially we only imported the get values. So we're going to need to import append values as well. And we should return the result. Return result. Excellent. So now let's try this out. I'm going to go ahead and click run. And here we can assign the values that we want to pass into our function. Let me just close this here on the side. And this is going to need to be in the form of an array of strings. So for example, let's say I want to pass in here apples, oranges, bananas. And I click run. And you can see here that in my mock data, okay, so returned, status okay, 200, that means this was successful. And if we check out the mock data over here, you can see that we added a new line, apples, oranges, bananas. If you don't believe me that that line just got added in, then let's try it one more time. I'll change this to pickles, run it again. And you can see that the data was added. Pickles. You even saw it live this time. So that is how we add a new line into the end of our mock data. And now let's take a look at how we can send that data that we want to insert from the front end of our website. So let me go back to our website here, and I am going to go back here to our Google Sheets front end page. And I've already brought in the add value to Google Sheet function, which we're going to be using. And in order to make this work, I'm going to need to add a few inputs here. So I'm going to add a input right over here, and it'll be a simple text input. I'll demonstrate this with one input, but the same principle can be used to create, for example, a custom form, and then input multiple values and enter it into the spreadsheet. So I'm going to change this to what should we insert it in? Let's say first name. Okay, so I'm going to show an example of inserting here into first name. So let's change our input to first name input. And then I'm going to add a button as well. And this will say insert. And I'll call this insert button. And we're going to add an on-click event listener to the insert button. And when that's clicked, we'll say that our first name equals to the value of the first name input. And then we will put this into an array. So I'm going to say const values is equal to, and I'm going to leave this first one empty. And here I'm going to put first name because first name is the second column in our mock data table. Here we could have put like just an ID or something. So let me, just for demonstration's sake, let's say this is our ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here we're going to say const result result equals await. So this is going to need to be an asynchronous function here. Await, and then add values to Google Sheet and values. And then I'm going to say if result dot status equals let's see, equals 200, console.log added. Okay, very simple. Obviously, you can make a more elaborate validation and kind of UX in terms of what's going on here. I just want to show the principle behind it. So let's go ahead to preview mode. And I'm going to add my name, and I'm going to click insert. And we see here that we got our console of added. And if I go to the mock data, you can see here at the end, we inserted my ID and my name. And of course, we could have created another like a complete custom form with all of this information. So that's how we add new information to our Google Sheet. Finally, to finish off this tutorial, I'm just going to show a quick backend demonstration of the update values and the clear values. So let's go ahead to the back end of our website. I'm going to head back to the editor over here. And in our back end, I'm going to import the update values and the clear values functions as well. And we're going to be using wrapper functions very similar to these. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this over twice. And I'm going to say update values in Google Sheet, and this is going to be clear values from Google Sheet. And here we're going to be using the update values function, and here we're going to be using the clear values function. And let's just make sure that we have all of the information that we need, all of the parameters. So if we take a look here at the documentation, then we can see that for the update values function, we need the sheet ID, we need the values, and we need a range. Okay, so this range, I'm just going to choose something towards the top of our mock data, so it will be very clear to us. So let's say the range will be A1 to C1. No, actually, I'll do A2 to C2, just because I don't want to update the header rows. Sorry, I'm putting this in the wrong function. This needs to go over here. And for the dimension, I'm going to put in row. And this should be a comma. Excellent. So let's try this out and see if it works. So I'm going to click here. And again, we're going to need to put in a value. So this is going to be an array. And let's say apples, oranges, pears. And I'm going to go ahead and click run. Data.major dimension. Okay, so it's saying the dimension was wrong. Let's double check the documentation. So rows, I think I wrote row instead of rows. Let's check that out. Yeah, I wrote row instead of rows. So let's fix that up and run that one more time. Returned, status okay. So let's take a look at our mock data. I'm going to go all the way back to the top here. And you can see that A2 to C2 were updated with the apples, oranges, and pears. Now I just want to do some experimentation and see what will happen if the range doesn't match the value. So here I gave a range of 3 and 3 values, but let's say we have 4 values. So what will happen? So I'm going to go and add another value here to the end. And this will be pickles. And I'm going to run that one more time. Okay, so the update failed because the range didn't match the value. So I gave too many values, but the range wasn't large enough. Okay, just another experimentation. So let's say I give it a range that is not one row. Okay, so let's say I give it A2 to B3. Okay, and then I try to update the values. Go ahead and click run. Okay, so this was successful. And if we go ahead to our mock data, then we can see that it updated within the row that I provided for the first value. So I said A2 to D3. So as long as the total area, you can say, is enough for the values, then it'll put it here in this first row. And I'm just going to do one more example where the values are not as long as the range that's assigned. So I'm going to get rid of these two values. And I'm going to change it to bananas, and tomatoes. And I'm going to run that. And that was successful. And we can see here that it just changed the first two. Okay, so if the values are less than the assigned range, it'll just assign it from left to right. Okay, so that's just some examples of using the update and what will happen in different situations that are presented. The last thing that we're going to do is just check out the, sorry about that, is just check out the clear values from Google Sheet, which is the clear values function. And the instructions that we get over here for clear values are just sheet ID and range. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to provide a range instead of values and run that function. So here I'm going to provide a range, let's say from B2 right, B2 to D9. Right, D9. I'm putting colons here everywhere where they shouldn't be. So, okay, so it needs to be formatted like this. And I'm going to go ahead and click run. And we returned with success. And if we check out our mock data, then boom, we just cleared a huge hole in our data. And these are two things that you're going to want to be really careful to. So getting data is the least dangerous, and then adding data is next, and then things like this with clear data. So you can imagine that if for some reason I passed this function to my front end, then that means that I'm potentially exposing my Google Sheet to being erased by anyone, which is obviously something that you will not want to do. So you'll have to be very careful when handling operations like update and clear, because they can really go ahead and screw up your sheet. So that's all for today. I hope you found this informative. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, then you know where the like button is. And if you want to see more videos just like this one, I'm releasing videos every week. Lots of things regarding Wix, from basic to advanced Velo topics like this one. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and you will be updated when my next video comes out. See you there.